Good evening, Miami. Happy Thursday, and welcome to another episode of Fast Break. As you can see, that's not Clutch. That's Justin Garfield. Welcome to the network from LA, a Houston Rockets fan, a Miami Heat fan. Welcome aboard, bud. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Alex. It's just an honor to be here.
Hey, it's a pleasure, man. Oh, we're gonna mix Clutch. Clutch is handling the family situation. Much love, Clutch. That's the voice of God. He's our sidekick over here, so he's off this week. So Justin, first and foremost, every time someone new comes to the show, I always like to know, where did your Miami Heat fan start? Your basketball fandom start? Give us a little bio about yourself.
Sure. So I grew up in Houston, Texas when I was maybe like 7 or 8 years old. I went to my first Rockets game. And I just remember going there several times with one of my best friends, and we just enjoy watching the game together. Although, also back then, I was also focused on finding the mascot. You know how ADD works. So yeah, there began my Rockets fandom, being from Houston, and then my mom is also from Miami, so I've got to have a little love for the 305 in there, which
Of
proves me a
course,
lot of love,
of
especially in
course.
college. I went to University of Central Florida, a little up north from where you are,
Uh
and that's around the time when LeBron was on the Heat, and they were the most exciting show all
huh.
over basketball, all over the sports realm, pretty much. Seeing LeBron and Wade in their prime together, I will argue that there's been no other exciting points more exciting than that in LeBron's career. I don't know about you.
I would say I would agree. A close second. Well, obviously the fandom from when he started the Chosen One, but in the whole spectrum, that's probably top. Maybe one is when he came back to Cleveland for himself on a personal level, but across the universe, it was a seismic move in the NBA, and you can argue that it shifted the NBA. It was a pre Big Three era and then a post Big Three era. Like we're kind of finding the NBA is finally stabilizing itself now. You can kind of feel, because we went from the Heat era to the Golden State era, and now it's kind of like leveling out. Like it's an even playing field throughout. But Justin, you mentioned that in regards to your Heat fandom and obviously your Rockets fandom. I'll start obviously since you were raised in Houston. I'll go to your hometown team. How do you feel in regards to the Rockets rebuild situation that's currently going on? As a fan from afar, I can see the excitement of their young nucleus. I can understand the frustration of what you're going through, and we see something, probably in the horizon. So from a Houston native, how do you feel? What is the situation that you're going through right now as a fan?
I'd like to start back to when the Harden trade went down, and maybe
Okay,
even before that. I'll start before that. When
floor
the
is
Harden
yours.
situation came to be, we all know the story. About a week before the season starts, Houston pulls off the shocking trade with OKC, brings Harden to town, changes the franchise for the next 7, 8 years for the better. Because finally, it seemed that we had some sort of direction, like actually on the path to competing, build around a guy who's clearly got the talent. Many people may have thought, okay, he's a six man of the year, maybe nothing more than that. And clearly, we saw he is far more than that. He became an MVP himself. But there's been just something that didn't feel right about the whole era. And I liken it back to Daryl Morey, our former GM now in Philadelphia, his philosophy of just getting the best players possible. And I know in the NBA nowadays, that's just the way you win. You need the star power. Gone are the days where you can really just build from the ground up like Golden State did, like San Antonio did in the Duncan era. But I'm still kind of that traditionalist who wants to see something built from the ground up where you draft a guy and he becomes yours. And I kind of wish I grew up in Miami sometimes because Miami got to grow up with Wade.
Yeah,
Being drafted in '03, he became Mr. 305. Sorry, Pitbull, but Wade's got that.
he'll take that. He'll take that. He's fine with
Yeah.
that.
But from the beginning, and then just the way that they built around James throughout that time, it just seemed like the organization was being held together by a piece of tape with Harden at the tip of it. And anything just had to be catered to him. And we saw some reports toward the end of the Harden era where he would be the one who, when he showed up to the meetings, that's when the meeting started. Or they gave him so much free range, so much power in the organization. And I know people like to talk about LeBron in that way, but the difference is LeBron has showed up when it's mattered. Harden, he's showed up partially, and then he's also faded. He's also quit in certain times. So what I'm trying to get at here is, in this current state of the Rockets after the Harden trade, it's been a couple years now, and there's no other way you should really be looking at it than being optimistic, in my opinion. You've tanked for a couple years. You've gotten some good high draft picks. You got Jalen Green. You got Jabari Smith. You've also got a couple later first round picks, Tari Eason, Alperen Şengün, and some other young guys too, Josh Christopher, Usman Garuba. So there's young guys all around the court here. The thing is, they're just so young. The only true veteran on that team with experience is Eric Gordon. And with him, I think it's just a matter of when is he going to get traded? It's been years now. He's losing value. He's going to be a free agent sooner before you know it. So you may as well get something. And of course, losing that kind of presence in the locker room may hurt in the initial part. But if guys like Jalen Green, if he's going to be the guy, if Jabari Smith's going to be the guy going forward, they've got to get used to this and just really take on that leadership role for themselves. But at the end of the tunnel, we see this year, Victor Wembanyama is the ultimate prize for whichever tanking team racing to the bottom is going to get. The sad part is it can only be one of them. Either probably going to be Houston, probably going to be Orlando, they're in the race, or Charlotte, or Detroit. And hey, the Lakers are pretty bad. The Pelicans have their pick. Could you imagine VW going there with Zion?
That's and what the Pelicans ones, I don't see them missing the playoffs. But the situation with the Lakers, how the NBA tends to have these casualties happen sometimes. It's like, oh wow, the LA Lakers won the draft lottery. All of a sudden, he goes to a huge market. But I wouldn't be surprised in the aspect of, because Houston is a decent market. If Victor Wembanyama, I see him as kind of like the Giannis effect, where he can change your franchise no matter which market he lands in. So obviously, whichever team goes and is lucky enough to win the draft, has a generational talent. This is something you build around for the next. This changes your just franchise value alone. The moment you draft them, your franchise value will skyrocket because it brings everything that goes tails, absolutely everything. And there are some teams you mentioned, Orlando, even San Antonio, Rockets. They have a young nucleus that I compare them to the situation with Cleveland. Cleveland had a young nucleus that took 2 to 3 years they were developing. And what do? You swing a trade for a disgruntled superstar where you have part of that nucleus and you acquire a veteran in the aspect of Zach Lavine. For example, and I'm going to segue to Mr. Zach Lavine. Irvin Figueroa, thank you for listening. Part of the show Imaging was Zach Lavine and the Heat. There's been rumors going around, and I love when these rumors come up because who wouldn't be interested? They'll mention a superstar's name. Oh, such and such team will be interested if this player comes available. Of course you're going to be interested. Everybody's going to be interested. Now, is it plausible? Can you acquire him? Is it worth it? I would say it's worth it, depending on what you give up. Zach Lavine just signed a max extension with the Bulls. If you're Chicago, and this is a situation they're facing, they're a middle-of-the-tier team. You can tell kind of Chicago hit their ceiling with Lonzo Ball being out. There's no more that this team can really do with the nucleus that they have now. So I'll present this to you. Justin, you're the GM of the Chicago Bulls. You have to choose a direction. You got DeMar DeRozan. You got Nikola Vucevic, which you're going to try to negotiate an extension with. Maybe you don't even extend him. So if you're not going to extend them, which is the same situation that Indiana finds himself with Miles Turner, the situation that Christian Wood might find himself with the Dallas Mavericks, if you can't work out an extension, you're going to risk losing this player for nothing in return. Also, Minnesota, D'Angelo Russell. That's a capped team. You're not going to acquire anybody via free agency. So you either have to sign and trade him in the offseason or trade him now and acquire a veteran, probably with a contract already. That's 2 or 3 years if that's part of your nucleus. You see Zach Lavine in Chicago, DeMar DeRozan. You're the GM of the Bulls. What do? Do you trade everyone? Do you keep Lavine? Do you keep DeRozan? What can you acquire the most for? Tell me, what do you do?
Chicago's got a couple things they could do. They could ride this core out and try to make the playoffs, especially because Lonzo has been out of the lineup for the majority of this year,
Correct.
Not all of it. And we haven't seen the Bulls to that strength in a long time. And we don't know if Lonzo's going to come back as the same player. So say if Lonzo does come back at some point this year and he's 75% of the player he once was. I think that helps ball movement a whole lot. It helps create shots for guys like DeMar DeRozan, guys like Zach Lavine, guys like Vucevic, setting him up in the paint. Now, Vucevic can also shoot the outside three. So, say if you do try and move a big man like that for a team needing that kind of defensive presence in the center with an outside game. See, in Orlando, when I lived there, Vucevic was the guy, and it seemed like they just can never figure something out. So, my question would be, where does he fit? Where does somebody like a Nikola Vucevic fit most? Say, does Boston need a guy like that? Does Boston have somebody that they can give up and he can go there? Of course, the Lakers are going to come up in every conversation because you know how much they're trying to trade Russell Westbrook, or at least the media says they're trying to trade Russell Westbrook. They're probably going to be one of the franchises swinging for the fences for Zach Lavine. Now, in particular, Zach Lavine to Miami, that's very interesting for a few reasons. For years, we've heard Miami's going to trade Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson and a pick or two for somebody. Maybe they tried for Harden a couple years ago, and the Rockets said no. And maybe they tried for Donovan Mitchell this past year, and Utah just didn't work out with that. But seeing that if someone like Chicago, a team like that, is looking to just blow everything up, they obviously need a lot of future picks going with that. And looking at Miami's current draft stock right now, according to heathoops.com, this upcoming draft, they have no picks whatsoever to give up. They have no first-round pick and no second-round pick. Starting next year, they have one first-round pick and a second-round pick. 2025, one first-round pick, no second-round picks. And a recent rule within the CBA says you can no longer trade first-round picks 2 years in a row. You can only pick swaps. That's what happened with the Anthony Davis trade, I believe.
Yeah.
So it makes it very interesting. If I'm the Chicago GM, going back to your initial situation, I'm blowing the whole thing up. I say, look, these guys clearly have a ceiling. None of them are going to get us over the hoop, over the hump of Giannis, over what Boston has built, over what Miami can be in the postseason, and we've seen this in the past years. So send DeMar DeRozan somewhere where probably you're going to have a team with cap space, or a team that will make cap space to take on his salary. On top of that, we'll need that inside shooting presence and that veteran leadership that could add to the locker room. Heck, I don't know if Golden State might need that at this point because we're seeing them not doing too well. If we're trying to get rid of Zach Lavine, look for a team or franchise just needing that new franchise star, or maybe a running mate for somebody. Like, say, look at Dallas, look at Luka. He's carrying everything as a one-man show. You can't tell me that Dallas wouldn't be thrilled to have Zach Lavine running by Luka, would you?
That's an interesting. I don't feel that they're a good mesh on the court, because I feel that you should surround Luka with shooters, defensive presence. But I wouldn't be opposed to it, because I think Zach Lavine does provide an athletic wing player to team up with Luka and maybe ease some of the production from Luka. And you can just imagine the level of production Luka will have if you remove all the attention to him. Because right now, honestly, Dallas is just offensively, it's just Luka. And now they're starting to use Christian Wood. That's a situation that I looked into from the beginning of the season, and I'm like, why are they not utilizing him this way? Why are they not using him X and O this way, whatnot? And now you're starting to maximize what Luka has. And Bobby, our fearless leader, what pieces would you give up for Lavine if you're the Heat?
Ooh, great
you see,
question.
this is the interesting part, and we were about to get to it. If you're Miami, first and foremost, right now you really can't trade Tyler Hero because of the cap situation in his contract. His contract is basically untradeable until next year because of the kickers that come in. I forgot the percentages that go up or whatnot. So ideally, what you're moving, you have to move draft capital. You have to move assets. So automatically, they're going to try to ask for Bam. That's a non-starter. That there's not even a discussion. They're not going to ask for Jimmy. We know that. Now they're going to start asking for probably Nikola Jovic, Tyler Hero. They're going to want, because they want to have young pieces to build around. They're probably going to try to get you maybe a Gabe Vincent. They might be intrigued Caleb Martin, because I love Caleb Martin. I'm not saying he's untouchable. I don't think he'll be moved, but he is an attractive piece for a younger team or even a contending team due to his contract and his style of play. Now, realistically, I'm moving Lowry. I'm possibly moving Dedmon for sure. I'm gonna try to get rid of Dedmon. I'm gonna try to make the salary work. You get rid of Duncan, but I believe even moving Lowry and Dedmon gets you to the salary match, but it's not the talent match. And a lot of people are putting a lot of emphasis in the Rudy Gobert trade, and that kind of set a bar for the NBA of you got to trade 5 first round picks and whatnot. The value in that trade was the first round picks. The talent really wasn't. They didn't trade any core players to the Jazz. They just traded draft capital. That's how they acquired Rudy Gobert. So that's the standing. That's the barrier right now. That's the totem pole of trades in the NBA now. With the Donovan Mitchell situation, you saw they acquired less first round picks, but they did give up rotational pieces. The Cavs gave up their first round pick this year, I believe in Kessler. They traded Laurie Markkinen, and I think it's Isaac Okoro they traded. Or no, we kept Isaac Okoro. I think they kept Isaac Okoro. I gotta check. I gotta make sure of that one. But they traded rotational pieces, and we saw what Laurie has been able to do in Utah. So those are situations that it's cool to talk about, but ideally, this year we're not going to acquire Lavine at all. Now, you do. I would very emphasize. I would like to emphasize this situation. I'm intrigued by the Lowry situation. I know they want to move Duncan just to get rid of that contract per se. They're not going to move him to do a lateral move. That's not going to happen. Realistically, what you're doing is this season, a successful trade is acquiring the front court help that you need and getting rid of Denman and Robinson. That you're going to have to attach an asset to that. I don't think they'll attach multiple assets to it. Names that intrigue me, and you can give me your feedback, Justin. I mentioned Bogdanovich from the Pistons. I'm intrigued by Miles Turner from the Pacers. I believe he's a nice fit. The name that came up this week was Christian Wood. If they don't reach an extension with Christian Wood, he's a possibility as well. I know they've thrown out names in D'Angelo Russell because of the Wolves cap situation where they're in the cap. If they're going to acquire any piece to make a playoff run, they have to really acquire him via trade. That's the only route they have, or biannual exceptions, I believe. So they might want to acquire Lowry. Now, the situation with Lowry, do you ride it out? It's not about him being Jimmy's friend. When Jimmy was really close with Goran, if this is a basketball move, you're going to talk to Jimmy. You're going to talk to Bam. You're going to clear it by them. The front office is going to make a decision with them in mind. Now, realistically for you, in season, upgrade moves. You make these moves, now you're going to transfer probably Orlando Robinson to a standard contract. Jamal Kane might get a standard contract. So because you're moving pieces, you're still protecting the cap situation because next year you're going to be a cap team. That's the only reason. It really bothers me when they try to call the Heat cheap. We've been a cap team. We've been a cap team many years. What they're doing right now is being smart because they're going to be a cap next year. Why start the cap clock now if you're going to still be competitive? Now, if it's a move that's going to put you over the top, I'm sure they'll sign off on it. So, in season, what is your idea, Justin, of an outside upgrade? And then we'll talk about if there's no moves made, which I believe there will be. If there are no move mates, what do we have with this roster? So I'll let you go. What is the best in-season situation that you see that might be benefiting for us?
Well, there's a very, very good reason that Pat Riley has his job and I don't, because you never deny the Godfather and his genius. So looking at this here, this roster overperformed last year, possibly because of what we saw getting the 1 seed, basically coming down to one missed 3 by Jimmy Butler away from the finals. And they're doing that with a starting backcourt with 2 undrafted guys. Now, when you think to yourself, how sustainable can that be going forward if you want to have long-term sustained success? And we've had a little bit of that same rotation this year, but Tyler Hero has gotten some starting minutes this time around. So, I mean, I look at this roster and I think, what can we actually do to get a bona fide like 1 guard or 2 guard who's still in his prime? Can you move Kyle Lowry for somebody like Zach Lavine? Can you move Kyle Lowry for maybe a guy like, I don't know if they would do this, but say Trae Young? I don't know. He's probably off limits, but Atlanta's not doing too well as well. If there's some kind of build up there, then that's all them. But I have heard some things online of maybe the Hawks are looking to unload him somewhere. That could be an intriguing piece. Or say if we want to just have one last ride it out. What if you went after a guy like Chris Paul? If Phoenix just wanted to throw in the tank this year and try to get their guy, we see the
That
Pacers with their guys, Turner, Halliburton. They're getting some chemistry right now, so good for them. But say if they feel like this isn't sustainable, they saw what happened in Houston with James Harden and say,
Mhm.
look, we acquired this guy, we just don't know how to build around him. If they wanted to acquire some other foundational pieces, and if we could get Halliburton, I'd say that'd be a heck of a deal, heck of a steal. And I wouldn't put it out of the realm of Pat Riley's genius to finesse a team like Indiana.
That's the thing. But you see, realistically, there's no way you're going to trade Halliburton. We know that. We know that. But like you mentioned, there's always surprise moves that come within the Heat possibility. People forget that we acquired Jimmy Butler with no cap space, no cap space at all. All you got to do in the NBA, all you have to do is have a guy commit and state that he wants to go somewhere. It's unfortunate, but that's leverage play. That's how it's always worked behind the scenes, and now it's more public because of social media and all that. But situations, for example, this year, I mentioned it from the beginning. Injuries set us back with the mindset of what we wanted to do. Obviously, Caleb Marlin is not your ideal starting forward. Caleb Marlin's ideal role is basically Jimmy off the bench. He's your reserve off. We bring him in, high energy, great defender, on ball defender, and waiting for Victor Oladipo. Now we have Vic back in the mix. We see the difference of what that creates, even when he plays with Hero. And it's crazy to me. It's all about sub patterns because schematically you can play a certain way, but if your player's not assertive, we've seen Bam Adebayo. They talked about no leaps. Bam Adebayo's taking a huge leap. In the consistency realm, we're starting to see it more and more and more. He has to believe in himself, and he's continuing that leap. Tyler Hero, another leap. It's a time frame where we talked about a lot in the offseason, Justin, in the network, and even with my friends. We're in a transitional year, which is a tricky situation because Miami has never really been in this situation that we're in right now, where you have an older core in a Jimmy, a Kyle Lowry. Obviously, he's your veteran presence. He gets your team in order. But you also have the youth that you see where it's going with Bam and Tyler. So I've always been me, myself, personally. I don't believe we're ever going to trade Tyler Hero. Does that mean he's untradeable? No, it does not. If the right person becomes available, like Kevin Durant, he's going to be moved, and other pieces will be moved. Now, my scenario that we talked about last episode, with the whole LeBron situation came up. Ideally, is there a better roster fit for LeBron than Miami? It's the best fit, honestly.
I
And
agree.
it's a situation where LA, I'll bring him segue to him. I understand why LA is reluctant to include those first round picks. LA feels that maybe they just ride this season out with the roster. You wasted another prime LeBron year because it's not even his prime, but these are LeBron prime. Like that's a different whole. That's a different ballgame. LeBron prime years are going to be forever. You're wasting another one of his years, but I understand what they're trying to do. Next year's Westbrook is off the books. Their whole core is off the books except Anthony Davis and LeBron. Now, what you're trying to bargain is who is going to sign with us. Is there a free agent right now that would like to sign with us? There's always going to be a free agent that wants to go to LA. Kyrie Irving's going to be a free agent. Is the recent success with the Nets enough to keep him in the fold and for the Nets to give him a max contract and ride it out with Kevin Durant because they have the perfect built team for Kyrie and Kevin? The whole situation with LA is they fumbled it this offseason by not acquiring Kyrie, by not pulling the trade for Kyrie or Buddy Hield and Miles Turner in the beginning of the year. Because I'll ask you, I'll put your GM hat again. Does it make sense for you now that the Lakers are, I believe, 12 games out? Or I don't even know how many games under 500 they are at this point. No, sorry, they are. They were like 19 and 20. I understand. That's true. They're 19 and 20. They're a few games out.
17 and 21.
17 and 21?
As of right now. Yeah, just
As
checking.
of right now. Do you go and trade multiple first round picks to upgrade a roster that might not necessarily be the same next offseason? Because Miles Turner's a free agent. You're only doing this trade if you're guaranteed that Buddy Hield and Miles Turner will be under contract for the next coming season. So at least 2 to 3 years while LeBron's in his contract. LeBron has 2 more years. So do you, as a Laker, for example, living in LA, you hear the rumblings. people are pushing to trade those picks to maximize what LeBron has. Do you justify trading those picks this year, or do you wait it out for next year and possibly use those picks to acquire another superstar like a Zach Lavine?
If the Lakers had a smart GM and their front office has been notorious for not having smart people there for the last 10 years, probably.
That's a perfect response to me.
I mean, it's true. Like when I was in college at UCF, I was stuck watching the Lakers. I'll say this because Kobe was injured, rest in peace. And you had a bunch of young guys or just old veterans who were playing and they were losing, but they would still put them on national TV, still put them in your face. The media still talks about them all the time. Just like the Lakers, they like all this publicity because it only helps them. And I guess that's true of a lot of things. Now, say if you do have a Jerry West type mind back running the Lakers again, yeah, look at this roster. You're not going anywhere with this. Anthony Davis is still a question mark every single year if he's going to be healthy enough to be there for X amount of games, because at some point he's going to miss them.
Yeah.
You look at Westbrook, is he really making this team better or is he detracting from what they could be? I don't know why they pulled off that trade in the first place, maybe just to make some more headlines. But seeing as how many people are willing to come play in LA with an aging LeBron, with an injured AD, with the Westbrook, who's more or less in the media for being selfish or being the opposite of that. I don't know Westbrook. I can't speak to how he is as a person or a teammate. But just let me ask you that. If you're a free agent and you see this circus going on one side of the Staples Center, how are you seeing the situation? Would you go there?
You see, I'll be intrigued because LeBron is there. So anytime you have LeBron, you're maximizing your chances of winning. But it all depends on the nucleus. So I'll be honest with you. That's why I feel they've had trouble signing any real free agents in the offseason or acquiring. First of all, they don't have the draft capital. They don't have the capital to sign me. They don't have cap space. They're maxed out. The moment they traded for Westbrook, you knew that was a LeBron-approved move. And they've always said it was kind of like more like a friend trade where you just want to have your buddy come over, be in LA, your kids are friendly, they play with each other, etc. LeBron, we all know he went to LA on basically basketball was a secondary nature to him in the reason to move to LA. It was production company. His kids were going to be established. They play for a national powerhouse. So his kids are about to graduate high school. That's why LeBron's not moving anywhere. But LA wasn't a basketball move for LeBron.
It was a business move.
It was a business move. It was a business move. It was a family move. It wasn't a basketball move. Basketball was the last in the totem pole. And yet they had a decent roster. And it's funny because they'll argue it. I know it got you a championship, but I was against the trade with the Pelicans where they gutted Ingram, where they traded Josh Hart, where they traded the only one was left over Kyle Kuzma, and then they traded Kyle Kuzma to the Wizards. So I was against that trade because I saw the player that Ingram could be, and I envisioned the player that he can be with LeBron. And they traded Alonzo Ball too to the Pelicans. That was part of the deal. So you gutted your whole roster that ideally, like I mentioned, it got you a championship. I understand that. But was it truly worth it gutting your roster? Because I believe they could have competed for multiple championships at this point. If you have a Brandon Ingram, if you had Alonzo Ball, if you had a Josh Hart, if you had a Kyle Kuzma, it's 20 times better than the roster that he has right now. So this is what sometimes in the NBA, the fans, become obsessed. And I can attest to it because here in Miami, like I've mentioned with other people in the network, we have a series of spoiled fans. We're entitled. We feel that we have to make the move. This offseason was a major loss in our market because we didn't acquire Durant and Mitchell. Like, newsflash, before the offseason started, Durant and Mitchell weren't available. That wasn't even a possibility. The fact that we were in it until the very end shows you the importance that we have around the league. There's a franchise that's respected around the league. People want to play for Miami. And we're a decent market. We're not a huge market. We're a very tropical market, obviously, a melting pot of a market. So we have all cultures. So it's a situation that I always see was LA is always going to be intriguing. The Lakers brand is always going to be intriguing. The city of LA as well. But in the situation they're in right now, do you really want to step into this shithole where it's LeBron's last 2 to 3 years, maybe prime years, what core am I going to have? Who am I going to play with? What role players are you going to have? I still don't understand as a coach. I don't understand how the blueprint is there to play with LeBron James, to maximize LeBron James. How do you not follow that blueprint? I don't get it. You had a chance to acquire Buddy Hield when he was in Sacramento. You didn't acquire him. You had a chance to acquire Kyrie Irving this offseason. You didn't make the move. Those are situations that you second guess now, but you're wasting seasons. This is already the third LeBron season they've wasted in LA. I believe that he's been there in four or five, right? How many? Four?
This is his 5th season. It's
This
crazy
is
because he's been there longer than he was in Miami now.
this is insane. I'm telling you, there's out of the 5 seasons he's been in LA, he's been out of playoff contention 3 years. That is not plausible to me when you have arguably the greatest player of all time. How do you waste 3 seasons here in Miami? That's why I always mention the thing. Success rate in Miami all 4 years, even at the end when we had older veteran players and we were going to retool, they were still in the finals. There was still competition. But with LA right now, I don't fear the LA team. And you're there, so you hear more than me. It's always going to be a Lakers nation, but at this point, you're not going to attract anything if you don't have a clear-cut vision of what you're going to do this upcoming offseason. So I'm intrigued by it, but I also understand the situation that they're in, that if they don't trade those first-round picks, the message that they're sending is like, we're giving up. But realistically, it might be best for the future of the franchise. It might be best to hold on to those picks because Zach Lavine becomes available. Those 2 picks are huge in acquiring a Zach Lavine. Can you imagine you trade those first-round picks for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner? You move Miles Turner doesn't resign. You're stuck with Buddy Hield, but you could have had Zach Lavine, and you can't acquire him because you don't have those first-round pick capitals. So that's the situation that they're in. That's tricky, but we'll see how it plays out. But Justin, we're in the trade market. Do you see any surprise moves? There's always that 1 or 2 moves that no one saw coming. That is out of left field. In the offseason, Atlanta Hawks acquired DeJounte Murray. I didn't feel it was a necessary move. I didn't feel it was a good nucleus move, and it's kind of showing now. You can't have him and Trey playing together. John Collins might be moved from there. The situation in Minnesota, they acquired Rudy Gobert. That completely threw off Cat's game, Anthony Edwards games. You're clogging the paint. They don't have any lanes, so they're being misused. What do you feel is a move that no one's expecting, but it could happen, of a movable player in season that might shock the NBA world?
That's tough to say one that's just totally unexpected out there, but I could give you a list of some who I think probably will be traded.
Go ahead. Boom. Let's go.
Let's start right with my Houston Rockets, Eric Gordon.
Okay.
Like we were saying before, Eric Gordon is a shooter who could come right off the bench, give you a nice 15, 20 a night. You still got some left in the tank. I think any contender would be lucky to have somebody like that off the bench and someone whose character, whose leader, locker room presence could be right there. And then you look at a team, gosh, if Golden State could use a guy like that, I'm sure they've got a 2nd-round pick they could send over to Houston. They're probably not going to get a 1st-round pick for Eric Gordon. They're going to get maybe some cash considerations, 2nd-round pick, maybe at best.
Match salaries expiring. Is Eric Gordon the last year of his contract right now, or he has another year left?
I think this is the last year of his contract, but don't quote me on that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Just because that also is going to help you out with your leverage if you have an expiring deal. So you might just swap out expiring deals and maybe, like you mentioned, some draft capital. But honestly, even with Gordon, I can see the Nets making a play for him. The Bucks somehow always, the last 2 or 3 years in season and before the trade deadline, they're always involved in just acquiring that extra player that pushes them over the top that year. So that's an interesting oh man.
Yeah, the last time the Bucks did business with the Rockets and netted them a championship with PJ Tucker.
PJ Tucker. That's true. That's interesting.
Yeah. You look at a guy like John Collins as well. You got to throw his name in there. With Atlanta constructed the way it is, obviously they gave up quite a bit to get DeJounte Murray. They ended up sending Kevin Huerter to Sacramento, which broke up their initial nucleus, but we'll see how it plays out for them because DeJounte Murray, he can ball. Let's not lie to ourselves. But does he fit alongside in this nucleus long term? Exactly. And the way they're reshaping it is John Collins going to be a mainstay in that nucleus long term. And we're seeing now that it's not where they were a couple of years ago, where they made the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
But then how about this one? Let me throw this one out to you.
Go.
Orlando trades Mo Bamba.
I think this is funny because a few weeks ago, I was actually talking to Bobby about it, and I feel Orlando is in line to make the Cleveland trade that Cleveland made for Donovan Mitchell. And I wouldn't be surprised if once again they do business with the Bulls and they try to acquire Lavine, because Orlando has desirable pieces, and they're gonna have. If you go through Orlando's roster from Markelle Fultz, you got Cole Anthony, Mo Bamba, Jonathan Isaac that is coming back. He hasn't played ball in 3 years because of ACL injuries. You got Paolo Banchero. You got Bol. You have a nucleus that is all 6'10" and above, and minus
You're not even mentioning Franz Wagner.
Oh my God, Wagner. Oh my God, the Franz. You cannot. If I don't envy any team, but in the future NBA, I don't think there's another team that is set up to succeed as well as Orlando in the next 3 to 4 years because of what they can do. Now, this is the problem. How do you manage those assets? Because Philadelphia, when they were tanking and trust the process, they misused almost 3 or 4 of their assets 100%. Where basically now is Embiid and Harden. You got Maxey, okay, but everybody they drafted before, from Marco Fultz, Nerlens Noel, all those players, you misused them. And those were first overall picks, top 3 picks. So Orlando has to be very careful what they do and who they move, because it could derail you once again. And we've seen teams, like you mentioned, they overperform, they get cocky, and they trust that core. They trade the wrong player, and what happens? You're back in square one, because they're going to sign a max contract, a rookie scale contract, because they're going to get the money. But they're going to be disgruntled. They're going to ask for a trade. They're going to make life a living hell. And Orlando has been through this a few times. The Shaq eras with Penny, the Dwight Howard. So they've built championship contending teams and haven't been able to sustain them for a prolonged period of time. So
and
this
end
is
up helping the Lakers in the end.
Yes, both times. So you can write it down. Paolo Banchero is a future Laker. You can mark it down on your calendar. It's just a matter of time.
We're calling it.
But any other one, Justin, that you think?
I'll get to that in a second, but I just wanted to say, yeah, I absolutely agree with you with the Orlando situation. They've got so many young assets and they're ascending. They're all growing together. Yes. But who do you keep? Because as they are, they need that one like Donovan Mitchell type trade to really take them over the top. We're seeing what's happening with Cleveland. I would say that Houston is just a few years behind Orlando, but that's where they're headed. They have all these young players that they're going to be talented, but they may not fit together necessarily. So how are they going to construct this team going forward? Does Şengün stick around? Does Jabari Smith stick around? And let me tell you, one of those young guys on Orlando or Houston will make great foundational core pieces, possibly somewhere else. If someday those two teams do start swinging for the fences.
You know, before you go, Justin, one dark horse, and I for some reason I always keep going back to it. I feel that Orlando might make a move for SGA from OKC, because OKC has Josh Giddey, and they have pieces that they can interchange, where Orlando might trade some depth and size, uprising pieces, and try to acquire a franchise change in SGA. And I don't know why I keep trickling back to that, because I do feel that someone's going to make a move. And this I think one of the teams that's going to be the most active is the Toronto Raptors. I have a feeling they're going to start moving some pieces that we didn't expect.
Toronto right now is in no man's land. Seems like they're just good enough to get to the middle of the Eastern Conference playoffs, but nothing more than that. First round exit. What do? Maybe it is time to let go of Fred VanVleet, who helped you win a championship, or a Pascal Siakam, who performed amazingly in certain games in the finals. Or maybe it is time to build around Scotty Barnes or unload him if you see that there's somewhere opportunistic. Maybe you get a whole lot more draft picks. Depends on what Masai Ujiri wants to do up there. And then going back to the Rudy Gobert trade, that's Danny Ainge, remember? The guy who broke down the Celtics and built them back up. He's a genius, just like Pat Riley, one of those evil geniuses who's just wheeling it through it. He clearly outsmarted a desperate franchise up there in Minnesota who hasn't done anything its entire existence, except for Kevin Garnett MVP, making the Western Conference Finals once. they're desperate to make a big splash up there so they garner some headlines. So to do that, he played them. He got 4 first-round draft picks and
Five,
basically nothing else
five.
really. Five, excuse me.
And Justin, when I saw that trade happen, I just I took a step back and I started analyzing it. I'm like, I try to go with a positive. I'm like, all right, Rudy Gobert, All-Star center, Defensive Player of the Year twice, I believe, back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year. Okay, I see. Cat has range. Okay, cool. Then automatically, I'm like, wait a second. Who is Cat going to defend? What type of defense are they going to run? Because they're going to try to pull Cat out. Cat can't keep up with the 3s and the 4s in this league nowadays. So Rudy Gobert is going to be in the paint. He's going to clog the paint for Anthony Edwards. D'Angelo Russell is going to become non-existent. So I'm like, holy shit, I don't think this is a good move. But I know they got their GM. They just got him. It was Tim Conley, right? From Denver.
It was. I'm actually not sure who their GM is.
Let me look it up because I know he became president of basketball operations, and that's his first big move, which is risky when
Tim
you tie
Conley,
yourself.
you're right, my brother.
Tim Conley.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes president of basketball operations. He swings his trade, and thanks to him, he fucking killed the market this offseason because everybody now. Oh, wait a second, Rudy can get you 5 first-round picks. I want 7 first-round picks. It was because these catastrophic numbers. Like, guys, you come back down to earth. That's not going to happen again. All he did was trade picks because he was desperate. And if they would have been patient, Minnesota was in the uptrend as well. They traded Vanderbilt. They were able to keep Vanderbilt. No, they traded Vanderbilt to the Jazz, and I really liked them in Minnesota. So once again, for lack of patience, just to make a move, a splash, what are you doing? And this reminds me, Justin, I don't know if you remember the trade that the Nets pulled with the Celtics. Well, you just mentioned it, the breakdown with Danny Ainge. That's true. You just mentioned it right there. From the Nets' perspective, I never understood that trade because you did it to compete against LeBron, Wade, and Bosh with an old broken down Pierce, Garnett, Deron Williams, who had no knees at that point. So because of that, Billy Keane is never get another job in the NBA front office ever again because you gut your roster, you trade cap assets. Like, what are you doing? You're not going to win basketball games. I understand. This is the part where the common fan doesn't understand. It's a business and it's a game. So I understand the business side of it and ticketing sales, marketing, merchandise sales. But I always like to look at it from the basketball perspective. There are some trades that don't make any sense, but the fans just want to move to make a move. So, sorry to interrupt. I'll let you go on. Which is your other trade destination?
All right, trade destinations here. And no worries. I love your tangents. They're great. Now, we've got to remember that Jay Crowder is still out there.
Yeah.
Jay Crowder's still out there. He's a guy who could come help. If he wanted to come back to the Heat, I think that could help. He's another wing who can defend, who can hit the 3. He helped them get to the finals in the bubble. So he's clearly familiar with this group. He's familiar with the organization. Why not, if you can swing that kind of trade and give up minimal assets to get something like that back? Maybe Miami could get back into the contention. But again, like you said, this is a transitional year for the Heat. And you also mentioned that Jimmy is getting older. He may not be the same in 3-4 years now. And if this is the guy going forward that Pat Riley's saying, we're going to win a championship with this guy, well, the time is ticking. And if you don't get there and you start to see a decline, I wouldn't put it out of the question. See if any team is desperate enough to trade for a guy like Jimmy and see what you can get back from that.
Whoa, Justin, that was out of left field. Oh, man. That's gonna create some havoc. And you know what we'll do? We'll do if you're available next week, Justin. I want to have you back with Clutch, and I want to do some Heat scenarios before trade deadline. Because you know what? Not before trade deadline. I believe next week. Oh no, next week is still the 12th, 13th. January 15th is the date on the calendar, so it's 2 weeks from now, where some of these contracts become tradable. That's when it starts spicing up. I know San Antonio made a trade today, minimal. They acquired Noah Volen and released Dieng. So that's a minimal trade, but it was basically a salary dump, a salary cap move. So next week, 2 weeks from now, is going to start picking up steam, and obviously trade deadline day, which I'm going to try to have a show if we can, based on my schedule with the games and all that. I'm going to see if we can have a trade deadline show so we can react to everything that's going on live. It won't. In your end, it probably ends like at 1. I think is it February 15th? I know it ends at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. on the dot. So we'll try to have a show that day, so we can get all these feedbacks. But we're running out of time. But I'll let you. You got any other trade scenario? Any other trade destination?
Keep your eyes on guys like Kyle Kuzma, could be in the news, Patrick
Yes.
Beverly, Kendrick Nunn, Jakob Poeltl, some guys who could come in and then just help some veteran-laden team trying to win a championship, provide that defense or provide that one last assist that's needed to go get the game-winning shot.
You just said it, Justin, and I hadn't brought it up. When you mentioned Kyle Kuzma, I think that might be a dark horse for Miami to acquire because it all depends on the extension, though. Do you tie yourself down and give him an extension as part of the trade, or do you just acquire him with the possibility of see what happens in the offseason and the benefit? Because I think he fits like a glove. I think he fits perfectly with
I
this
can
Miami
see it.
roster.
They always talk about heat culture. I
Yes.
see Kuzma as a guy who would move right into Miami and embrace it full on. To have guys like Bam and Wade come in and then talk to him, Bosh come on in and talk to him. And of course, Jimmy take him under his wing and say,
Yes.
hey, look, this is how things are run here, and we need you to buy in, which he probably didn't get in Washington, or LeBron, being LeBron, was like, hey, just do your job. I'm trying to win a championship. I think Kuzma can become like a real rotational piece and bigger part of things.
He is, and he's developed. He's continued to develop. He kind of plateaued. He had an exceptional rookie season, and that's the reason he wasn't moved. Honestly, and that's the reason he was kept with LeBron and LA at that time. But he's developed and he's rounded out himself as a player where he's a key rotational piece in a championship roster. So I wouldn't discount that at all, at all. But before we go, any other words, Justin? Any other trade scenario that you want to throw out?
Not much, man, but thank you for having me. 305, I love you. Hopefully Jimmy's not leaving.
No, he won't. I just want to thank Justin. First of all, thank you for coming on. And like I mentioned, in subsequent episodes, coming weeks, I know Miami, you've worked with me. Based on my game schedule, sometimes I'm able to do a show Wednesday or Thursday. We're always going to try to be, if we can, Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. At times, you might see it myself Thursday with Clutch. Hopefully, Justin comes back more often. And I want to have you on, man, at least twice a month if I can. So whatever you're available, you're always welcome to come on and talk basketball. Any team. I don't care what the topic is. But first and foremost, before I leave, Fins Talk Sports Network, we're already over 500 subscribers, and we're very happy with this. This started as a dream for my brother Bobby a year ago. We continue to grow. As you can see in the little ticker below, there's Venmo and Cash App. We never ask for donations. It's just if anybody wants to help out, all is for the show production, merchandise, giveaways. So everything that comes in is always going to go back out to the fans. We've always said this. This network is from the fans, for the fans. We don't make any money out of this. We do this because we like it. This is a hobby for us. We love talking sports. And like I mentioned, Justin, before off air, so peel the curtain off a little bit behind the scenes, this network has really brought people together from all over the world. And we've always known fandom extends lines, border lines, country lines, everything. And it's really united fans from all over the world. Canada, we have fans in continental United States, Houston, LA. We have podcasters in this network that's a Miami-based network. We have more podcasters from out of state. And that's just to show you the power of sports, the power of the brotherhood, even the sisterhoods. So anything that you guys want to talk about, not only in this show, any other shows. Obviously, we're Dolphins heavy. Postseason is coming. Situation in the front offices might be changing. Tua's hurt. So it's very intriguing, and congratulating on them on their shows that they're off the charts. We have Huddle Up and Wait coming up at 9 o'clock with Brett and Dave. Love them. You can check them out. But first and foremost, lastly, I want to thank you, Miami, for tuning in. Justin, for coming along. And please, always feel at home, and you're always welcome back, my brother, okay?
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody tuning in. Love y'all.
Miami, have a good night. See you next week. Take care, baby. Heat lifer. Oh, some technical difficulties. I'll hit the outro now.